Welcome, everybody, to episode 90 of Door Tunes. And this week, I'm joined by a very special guest, like all of my guests are. But I think I'll get them to introduce themselves.
My name is Jonathan van Wijngaarden. I'm not trying to going to try to pronounce that in English because that's usually going to sound pretty weird. Um, I'm from the Netherlands. I'm a Dutch composer. I've been mainly been working in video games for the past almost 2 decades, so that's quite some time. Did a lot of different kind of projects, and yeah, that's basically my base introduction.
Yeah, welcome to the show. Well, thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
us. Um, I do ask this question quite a lot of different composers. I know you said you've been in the industry for a couple of decades, which is amazing. Looking at things that you've done is amazing, and we'll go into that in a bit. But how did you really get started? So, like some people, just knew somebody, or they were invited to speak to somebody, or they did classical, instruments at college or university, etc. How did it happen for you?
Yeah, that's an interesting story actually. I grew up on the very early days of video games. My first recollection being very early personal computers. My dad would work in the ICT and accounting actually, and he would actually have a very almost like a hunger for this new thing that was a personal computer, and he felt that this was going to be something of the future, like something we'd be using all from our homes. And he actually
Well,
said, yeah, he set goals to, whenever they would have all personal computers at his work, and nobody wanted them and they were of lesser value, he would, make an arrangement that he could bring them home. So we were pretty much early adopters in our family at that age. I was like pre-teens even, and I was one of the few that would actually already have PC on his in his bedroom, and I could actually play with that. And obviously, also growing up on consoles, early Nintendo and Sega stuff, that really triggered my appetite for storytelling in games and the music that came with it. Obviously, I mean, we all have our favorite soundtracks from that era, so that's something a lot of people share. And that sort of sparked the idea that I was having music lessons back in the day as well as from early on, because my parents felt that was, a very, important element of education, learning at least the basics of, music construction and learning how to play. But I always felt that playing existing pieces was, it didn't really trigger me in the right way, like, it would normally do. But I was very keen on doing experimentation myself. So writing very simple songs, recording stuff, very primitive. And at that early age, I sort of those two things they came together, and I started to getting interested in it, actually producing music a very early stage, and also being a fan of video game music. So I would actually, record on cassette tape, ancient medium, soundtracks from video games, so I could actually listen to the music outside of the games, because otherwise I would have to, keep my PC running or my console running. So that was my basically the spark that led to, going into this direction. Um,
oh, wow.
and yeah, I mean, sort of how this turns into, being more serious. And I said this was an interesting story. Was I was a very big fan of Frank Lepaki back in the days. He wrote the music to Command and Conquer. He was lead composer at Westwood Studios,
Mhm.
and I just loved his music. I was entirely blown away by his blending of modern musical styles. He would blend heavy metal with, orchestral classical music, with hip hop, with industrial and
Mhm.
techno, and that just really connected with me. There was something new, and in the early days of the internet, I just decided to, through their website, I sort of figured out what his internal email would be, and I sent him an email, and I said,
Wow.
I'm not sure if you appreciate this, but I'm a huge fan of your work. Um, I'd love to do something in video games down the road, but I just wanted to know that, we're so far apart, yet, I'm a big fan of your work. And he actually responded to that, and from that grew, a friendship over time. At first, a mentorship, where he would actually start providing feedback on the music that I would be writing, which was very kind, obviously. And yeah, but that sort of over the years developed a friendship and more of back and forth sharing music. But that's sort of how I rolled into making this, from this whole dream element into something more practical and actually starting to practice and improve my skills.
Right. I mean, that's amazing. That's such a good
Yeah,
story. Um, I really wish, when I was younger, I did the same thing almost as you. I used to record the top 20 or top 40 when it was on the radio, and you'd sit there with the buttons and you'd be like that.
yeah,
I never thought to do it with the soundtracks because I loved the music as well, obviously. Um, I remember the first time playing an Amstrad, um, and I played a game called Solomon's Keys, and it just, mind
yeah,
was completely blown. And to this day, I can hear it in my head now, and I'm like,
yeah. I mean, it's amazing, and I'd like to see video game music as music without any rules. Like
yeah,
there's no clear boundaries between genres. There's no, no do's or don'ts. Like anything that a composer can get,
mm,
creative freedom in, it can actually happen. And I feel that's also something that connected with me back then was like, there doesn't have to be any rules to it. Whatever feels and works for the game
yeah,
is entirely valid. And I think that's what makes it so, video game soundtracks so surprising in that sense. They always surprise you in what they're going to be doing and which genres they're going to be blending. And I think that's very interesting.
yeah. And it's amazing how uh, a soundtrack can really make a game. You know, there are certain games you would never consider to have a different sound if you get me. You know,
Mm, yeah,
absolutely. You know, like for example, Bloodborne. Bloodborne, kind of Elden Ring, all those kind of things. They're very grand. They're very kind of, and they're very different. They can be quite, heavy and then very light. It's just amazing. I love it. You know.
yeah, and of course, apart from the whole narrative and mood aspect that comes with
Mm,
it, that something that it carries over from more linear media like film. It
mm,
also has this added element where it can sort of um, drive the whole gameplay experience and sort of steers players into doing certain things, like having very up-tempo music, moves them quicker through levels, and that whole element is also very interesting. I think it's to sort of subconsciously steer players
mm.
into doing what the actual designers are looking for.
Yeah. Like, for example, you are exploring and then suddenly your music starts to change because it knows that there's some enemies close by, so the music kind of builds up to them, and then kind of you get into a gunfight, whatever, um, and then kind of when they've been killed, whatever, the music goes back to the way originally how it was.
Yeah,
Really
yeah,
clever.
yeah. That's a great experience.
You're working on a few games, I know at the moment. Not right. You're working on Arizona Sunshine 2 and The Seventh Guest VR.
Yeah, and there's actually a third that has just shipped, which is sort of like a different kind of game, which is called Symbiotes, which is more like a visual novel, science fiction novel,
Okay.
which was also very fun because it's something entirely different from what I normally do, where the music obviously is driven more by gameplay, and here I could actually write more linear music and come up with a lot of different themes for the different kind of characters. So that was also a very cool experience. Yeah.
How did
And
you
there's
find
there's some more stuff that hasn't been announced yet, which I can't really disclose, but yeah, it's been busy.
Oh, we all know about NDAs. Um,
Yeah.
for Symbios, how did you find that? Obviously, you said it was more linear. How did you find that working on that in relation to kind of not in relation to apart from the other games that you worked on?
Um, I find it actually not that different. My approach for doing more adaptive music isn't entirely that much different. It's basically a collection of different kind of elements that have to work together, and one of them is narrative, one of them is obviously setting a certain mood, one of them is inspiring the player in certain ways, or evoking motion.
Yeah.
For me, that doesn't really change when it becomes adaptive, an adaptive score. The only thing is that maybe the technical approach is slightly different,
Mhm.
but I do love writing for a narrative. So I always try to have some sort of story in the music that I write, and I feel that that whatever game I'm working on, that doesn't really there's not a lot of difference. There's only difference in tone and difference in feel, but not per se in approach. For me, in my head, it's sort of like the same approach.
And you're obviously working in VR at the moment with Arizona Sunshine 2 and separate guests. Is that any different from working on like just a normal game?
Yeah, it actually is. I find that I've been doing VR games since the very first Arizona Sunshine title, which shipped in 2016. So it has some of become more of a second nature. So I might not be that much aware of the different approach I'm taking, but there is definitely in terms of intensity, I try to subconsciously always dial it down a notch, because in VR there's usually a lot of different kind of sensory input.
Mhm.
And I find as a player of VR games that you it can quickly get overbearing and too much for a player, and that's sort of like diminishes the experience. So I try to sort of take it back slightly, with the added comment, obviously, that also the mixing process is different, because there's a lot of the devices that are out there right now, they have built-in audio output speakers, if you can even call them that, very, very simple in terms of dynamic range, and very simple in terms of frequency response. So you know, when I'm working on a regular game score, I can, really hit that low end and make it really big. But that's a lot different for VR titles, because I know the players won't really experience that kind of stuff, and it will only get in the way of the other elements of the soundscape. So it's not vastly different, but I find that there's nuance more in comparison to other games. Yeah, for sure.
And you mentioned about being a VR player. I've just recently got the PSVR 2. I had the PSVR 1. It's amazing. Have you played stuff like Res or Fall of the Mountain?
I try.
These
I've been
versions.
mostly been focused on, yeah, but the downside of being very busy is that I get not enough
No
time
game
playing games.
time.
So what I normally do is I do make a selection of the titles that, when I see them, inspire me, directly or indirectly on the work that I'm currently working on. So for Arizona and previously after the fall, I've been mostly been focused on atmospheric games that are you know trying to establish a world building kind of approach more, because that's what I'm trying to do with those two games. And I'm definitely not restricted to VR games, but like I said, the time is limited, so I'm definitely not playing as many games as I would like. There's a huge backlog of stuff that I need to go through.
Oh, don't tell me. I'm exactly the same. It's like, and then you buy another game. And it's like, oh, another
Yeah.
one to add to the list.
Well, it's on sale. It's half price.
Exactly. I'm like, one of my favorite games to play is Elden Ring, just because I play it with my best friend. Where like she's ahead of me, but I'm almost 300 hours deep. It's what we do to relax. It's just
Yeah.
nice. We just plonk
Yeah,
along.
yeah, that's fun. Yeah, I'm a big Legend of Zelda fan.
Hmm.
I've been buying every single Zelda game upon launch since the Link's Awakening on the original Game Boy. So, whenever a Zelda game is announced, I pre-ordered a collector's edition, and I did the same for Tears of the Kingdom. And it took me weeks to even get off the tutorial island, because, was crunching away on the projects and I had no time. And I actually had to make sure that my son is actually, much faster than I. He's 10-year-old, and he has a lot more time. He goes a lot faster through the game, and he would, during breakfast in the morning, say, well, I've been to this and this and this, and I've experienced this. I'm like, shh, hush, hush, no spoilers for me because it's gonna take me weeks until I get there.
No,
Um, so yeah, those are moments where I realize that I don't have the amount of time that I used to have, which sometimes is a shame. But
yeah, no, I hear you on that one. I also have Tears of the Kingdom, and I had to send my Joy-Con back to be repaired. That took like 2.5 weeks. Um, because he would literally just go for a little wander by himself all the way over there. And I don't know why, I find this one so huge in scale because you've got like the normal land, then you've got below, and then you've got above, and it's just like
yeah.
so much to do.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you feel
Breath of the
so,
Wild for me was on the edge of what I can still manage, and now it's like triple that size.
yeah.
Uh,
And it's
I,
amazing that they
I
can get that out of the machine.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a crazy game. I actually found it funny to read that Ubisoft announced that the new Assassin's Creed, is going to be, people are going to be able to finish it relatively quickly and a bit easier than previous games because it's going to be smaller and more dense and more. And I was like, yes, this is this is the type of games that
Do you
we
know,
need
I
to
have
have
so
more.
many Assassin's
Yeah,
Creed in my spare room. I have even like the one that was released on PS5. What was that one? I never remember.
yeah.
Um, Unplayed, completely unplayed. I'm like, oh man, I know I like them, but it's just 160 hours. I'm like, it's not Elden Ring.
Yeah, yeah, it's huge. Yeah, it's crazy.
Gosh. So, quick question I've just thought of is because you've been in the industry for so long and you've done quite a number of games. Do you ever listen to the stuff that you've done like 10 years ago, 15 years ago?
Very occasionally. It's
And how do you find that?
that's a bit, yeah, I mean that's a bit of a difficult thing, and not always. Sometimes I'll actually find material where I think, this is pretty decent. But I'm, we all know the whole inner critic thing, and I think especially creative people and composers really have a very vocal one. At least I have a very vocal one. So for me, it's good that there's actually, gold master deadlines where we actually say, okay, now it has to be wrapped and we actually have to ship it because I could work on the same game for years and still tweak and keep going.
Yeah.
But yeah, to get to your question, yeah, I mean, I don't really sit down and listen to it, but
Mhm.
it's usually whenever I'm trying to, reminiscent of a certain project, or sometimes I would even projects that have slipped my mind over the years, and I go back and like, oh yeah, I worked on this, and I actually did some music for this title, um, and that's kind of fun. So, that's more like a nostalgic throwback kind of thing rather than listening to it from a
No.
professional perspective. Because yeah, that's stuff I've done a year ago. There's already a lot of stuff I want to update, but that every single composer has this, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then, are there any kind of soundtracks over the years that you've listened to games that you haven't worked on, that that really stand out for you?
Um, yeah, I'm also pretty versatile. I mean, out of the stuff that I usually regularly work on, like I said, I'm a big fan of Nintendo and their first party titles. I think also from a music perspective, the Zelda games are with their thematic approach and all the stuff they've going is always blowing my mind. There's always, they're always looking for something new and doing something interesting. Um, and I had the same thing with Mario Odyssey, where they did so much, integration of music into actual gameplay, and you know, using zip lines, and then sort of having this tonality into the zip line sound effects, and actually adjusting it to the music that we'll be playing. All those kind of crazy stuff that these very great companies are capable of doing. So I can really enjoy that kind of stuff and do this. I do play a lot of strategy games as well. So
Okay.
I think it was last year when I was finally able to catch up on the last Homeworld title, which is Deserts of Carrick, I think, which I thought had really great sounds and really great music. It was very ambient in approach,
Mm.
but it had something that was very interesting and very um, I like to it's sort of maybe again the kind of material that I love doing myself is sort of blending the line between sound design and music and sort of have this move in and out and make this like a one thing, almost like a one performance. I think that's really cool. So titles that do this are usually the titles that I'm drawn to and that have catch my eye or ear.
Well, yes, yes. And I think also it can depend, for me at least, if I'm like on the bus on the way on the way into work, I'll be like, what kind of mood am I in for the music to listen to right now? Am I into something a bit more kind of, you know, raucous, or do I want something really quiet? So quiet that I actually can hear other people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that sounds perfectly recognizable. I find it often, I find it hard to listen to, like really listen to, like not from a analyzing point of view, but really listening to certain genre when I'm working on something similar in terms of game or feel. Because I start to analyze and I start to looking for the tricks and the mannerisms that are in the music. So that's not a very comforting experience. So I try to usually pick the music that is, entirely on the other end of the spectrum whenever I'm listening to it. So yeah,
Yeah, I totally get you with that because I was speaking to somebody else recently, weeks ago, and they were like, I've got this song in my head, but it's great, but I don't need it in my head right now because I'm trying to compose. And it's like,
yeah,
and all they could hear was the beats, and he's like, no, I need it not to be like that.
yeah,
I'm glad
yeah.
I didn't get that.
Like when I finished after fall last year, you know, I I sort of was done with using overly analog synth kind of stuff. I'd written so much music for the game, and then sort of like emptied the entire bucket in terms of inspiration and things that I could handle even when listening to it because I love listening to a lot of the synth wave and dark wave material that's out there. There's a lot of cool stuff happening in the genre as well. Um, but for a couple of months, I was just entirely done with listening to that. And luckily, working on different kind of projects, I get to quickly swap different kind of genres, like what I'm doing now for Symbios. I wrote entirely a synth soundtrack after I get to recharge from after the fall, and then for the seventh guest, we did an homage to the original by the Fat Man himself. And obviously, it's more spooky, it's more atmospheric. It has a bit of a jazzy tone to it. It's different than the stuff that I usually do. And then we have Arizona Sunshine, where I'm trying to, evolve the sound that I set for the original one, which was, a lot of weird sounds, sort of blending it with synthesizers and sort of spaghetti western kind of feel. Sort of take that one step further and try doing something new with that. So those three different projects, they sort of kept me sane in the busy periods where I could, whenever I had a rough day, I could switch to the other project and, get inspiration from that project and write something, write a cue for that project.
Yeah, I have to admit, I am extremely looking forward to both of those, the seventh guest particularly, and Arizona Sunshine too. And
Cool.
weirdly, a friend of mine who I interviewed for this show a few weeks ago, is also working on it. That
Cool.
person,
That's great.
Alex Jones.
Yeah. Alex is actually involved with a lot of dialogue editing for the seven guests. She and Kevin did an amazing job on the processing and they've also done this for Arizona too. So yeah, it's great to have them on board. They really bring a lot of dialogue expertise to the table in that sense.
And they've got their game coming out next year, which should be really exciting.
Yeah,
Really looking forward to
yeah.
that as well. Um, One of the things we're going to ask you as well is about obviously you've got your soundtracks that you've worked on. You work on something that gets released. A lot of times now these days you see a lot of soundtracks announced way before it's released, coming out on vinyl. I have to, I'll hold my hand up and say I am a vinyl collector, particularly for video game music. It's an expensive hobby, you never start it.
Pretty
What do you
did.
think
So
of the
yeah.
kind of resurgence and the kind of excitement around vinyl and video games music?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that the whole vinyl craze to me is very exciting. As well as a somebody who just loves to listen to music. I started collecting about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And for me, it sort of brought back the whole listening to music experience. So I'm more actively involved in listening. I'm actually
Absolutely.
grabbing the album that I want to listen to, which is to me is a very very relaxing experience. Where normally, whenever I would be listening to music, I sort of felt always compelled to start analyzing material
Yeah.
and starting go into work mode. And this sort of helps. This is like the only way I can actually listen to music in a sense and actually experience it in full. And I think that's really cool. We did, limited pressing for After the Fall last year, which was a very, very cool thing from Vertigo Games to do. It was actually my first soundtrack on vinyl, so that was kind of like a nice thing to tick off the box. And a bit crazy as well, holding it in your hands and you know, um, yeah, that's really cool. But like you say, it's expensive and it takes a lot of time for the processing plants to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, typically, working on soundtracks, you have to actually first finish the soundtrack, and then there needs to be different kind of arrangements because a lot of the time, especially with After a Fall, I think I spent over 2 months creating different arrangements for the adaptive score because it wasn't entirely adaptive. I think we had only one track that wasn't. So, that's a lot of work, and that needs to be wrapped up, and then it needs to be mastered for vinyl, and then it needs to go to the processing plant. So it takes a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
So not all developers are always very keen on doing that kind of stuff because it's going to be post marketing buzz, so it's not going to be very helpful in terms of marketing. But it's I think it's really cool. I think this should be a default on game soundtracks for sure.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what Rex is an expensive hobby, but it's something I started and I really wouldn't stop now. I recently got I got Medium yesterday, the Medium soundtrack. I got that yesterday, and that's beautiful. We also recently got the other week, the Horizon Forbidden West box set. That was the most expensive one I've purchased so far, but it is immense. It like the box is so heavy. It's like a magnetic opening. It's all gorgeous vinyl. I'll send you the pictures. Um, Really beautiful presentation. Well worth it. So
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's the way we should be celebrating soundtrack and scores.
absolutely. And
Yeah,
as you mentioned, there is delays in processing plants, etc. I've purchased one. I'm just over 2 years waiting. So and it's
yeah.
still not here.
Yeah, we had a pretty decent. We did our pressing with Deep Brews, which are also located in the Netherlands, and they have almost a green pressing approach to their vinyl, which I think is pretty cool. So they try to recycle the every all the surplus that they have from cutting the vinyl. Um, and they were actually relatively fast in these times. Last year, I think it took them 6 months from first approval up until getting units ready. But again, this was a limited run of pressing. So I'm guessing if you need like I don't know 5 6K in terms of copies, it's going to take a lot more time, obviously.
And it's crazy because, as you know, if something's announced that it's going to go on sale, you need to buy it like that because otherwise it
Yeah,
disappears. You know,
yeah, yeah,
um, don't. It's like the Outer Wilds. I love that soundtrack.
yeah.
Really, and they repressed it. I think they did something like, I can't remember, it was 500 or 1,000, and it went within 2 minutes, literally
Yeah.
gone. So they're going to repress it again later on this year. So fingers crossed I'll be able to get it.
Yeah,
But
you don't have a lot of time to think about it. Yeah.
no, and it's really, this community. It's a really small, friendly community. I'm on a Discord about video game music on vinyl, and more than once I've said something about a game, and somebody's messaged me going, "Actually, I've got one that's just sat here. I'm happy to sell it on." I'm like, "This is amazing." You know, that
Yeah.
happened with Firewatch by Chris Remo. I love Firewatch. I don't know whether you've actually played the game. Um,
No.
oh, it's gorgeous. Also terrifying. There is I won't spoil it, but there is a scene. It terrified me at least. But the soundtrack is just gorgeous, you know, and I can hear it in my head now. It's like, see, this is what I
Yeah,
enjoy, about video
it's a
games.
great hobby to have. Yeah, to
Yeah,
celebrate music for sure.
and you're correct. You are giving the music that time rather than you being able to analyze it. It's almost like a special moment that you're having with the music. You're sitting there and you take it out of the case, you put it on the record player, you turn it on, you make sure you've got the music at the right volume for yourself, and you just sit and you just enjoy.
Yeah, yeah, that's how it should be, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Instead of just hitting a random Spotify playlist and not knowing what the artists are and the the actual the actual albums that you're listening to, which is how a lot of young people grow up these days. They don't even
Don't
they
listen to
listen
albums.
to a certain genre of music and they no longer know
Mhm.
the actual artist in a sense.
So I am going to ask you one final question to wrap up. And obviously, I understand about NDAs, etc. But is there anything that you're working on that you want to talk about or you can't talk about? He's thinking.
Um,
No, it's fine.
no, apart from the stuff that has been
Yeah.
announced, which has been also been my main focus for the past 2 years, I think.
Wow.
Arizona was quite a ride.
Yeah. When are
And
they looking to
obviously,
ship?
sorry.
When are they looking to ship Arizona and the seven cats?
I know the seven guests I know because the is actually being announced during the Gamescom
Oh, okay.
live sequence this
I'll find out.
evening, which is going to be October if I'm not mistaken. I got it correct.
Spooky season.
I'm not sure if there's officially something on Arizona too. So I'm going to just to be sure zip it when it comes to that.
Yeah.
But the seven guess is really close, and I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm really excited.
Really
It
excited.
has been crazy experience. George being one of those giants that did a lot of scores on games that I grew up with.
Mm.
And that to me is also a very fun part of being working in this industry. I get to meet a lot of people, a lot of colleagues now
Yes.
who I used to idolize. Some of them I still idolize because they do crazy and amazing stuff. But sometimes getting kind words from these people, that means a lot to me because that's those were the people that actually inspired me to go down this route. And the same goes for George. So sending me the first pieces of music, and then and getting back from him that he really loved it, and we actually got to do some music together where he was actually able to play some guitar and provide some vocals for a track that I wrote, which I think is really cool. I said to the team there, I don't really care how we do it. There has to be a way we can get him involved in something more than just being the person who did the original. Um, and I hope that's also going to be something that the players and the fans are going to be appreciative of.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Well, they will. I'm sure they will. But just wanted to say thank you ever so much for being a guest on the show. It's been a real
Yeah, you're
pleasure.
welcome.
And best of luck with Arizona and the seventh guest. Can't wait to play them and everything else that you're working on. And we hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on the show.
No worries, anytime. So that's the end of this episode, folks. So we will see you next time.